Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, hosted by me, Brandon Davis. And in today's episode, I'm going to be interviewing my new friend, Rahz Slaughter. What a cool last name, Rahz Slaughter. He's sitting there taking some pictures while we're getting going for anybody watching out there today. Rahz has a very inspirational story, and I believe it's a story that resonates with the entire message of Get Over Yourself. Rahz came from a very interesting background where his mom was addicted to various substances, and he grew up in a system that did not believe in him. He had horrible grades. He didn't really have any mentors or anyone in his life supporting him, and yet he has overcome all those limitations from a young age to become the man he is today. A father figure, a motivational speaker, a coach, and somebody who can give you a positive message today. So, with that being said, Rahz, welcome to the Get Over Yourself podcast. You emulate the entire message we're trying to share. Super excited to have you. Let's jump in today's episode.
Brandon, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
So yeah, Rahz, tell us a little bit about your background. When we were talking a little bit before we recorded, one thing you mentioned to me is when you were younger, I believe you had less than a 2.0 GPA when you're in school. That is wow, like you grew up struggling a little bit, if we're being blatantly honest. Tell us a little bit about that and what it meant to you when you were younger, when you didn't really have anyone, your teachers, any mentors, anybody around your community who believed in you.
Yeah, man. I mean, just jumping right into that part of the story, academics were not something that I saw as a beneficial as a young man because I didn't have any guiding light. I didn't have any mentors. My grandmother had a second grade education. My mother didn't graduate high school. Her brother didn't graduate high school. So, school wasn't that thing that really resonated with me because I just didn't know. And I tried my best, but I also had a lot of learning challenges that went undiagnosed. And during this period, I wound up with dyslexia, ADHD, and any other the ABCs or Zs you want to add on in labels. But really, it was just like a lack of belief. The teachers that were responsible to assist me just didn't have the resources and tools necessary to find the learning style that I later found out and was able to persevere through. Now, I've gone on to become very avid reader, someone who loves education and academics, going back for my master's. So it really was a story of perseverance and finding self-actualization of who am I and what are my strengths. And that's something that I try to inspire youth all over the world today, is that we're all unique. Just because that 1.62 GPA when I graduated high school was where I ended high school, it didn't mean and dictate where I would end up in life.
What did it mean to you when you were younger? I mean, when you're a kid, even when you're an adult, this happens, but especially when you're a kid and you have all these outside influences telling you you're not going to be enough, you're not smart, you're not educated, you're not physically fit. There's a million labels, like you said, that people can throw on you. As a kid, that demoralizes you. You feel like you have nothing going for you. And I'm sure, like you said, you had a very rough upbringing too. You didn't have a lot of personal connections who you could look up to as mentor figures in your life. What did that mean to you when you were graduating with such a low GPA and you probably had all these people in your corner saying, you got nothing going for you, man. Good luck.
Brandon, great question. I'll tell you, when I walked across the stage with that 1.62 GPA, I was proud. And here's why. I had crossed the finish line of something that many people in my family hadn't done. So that gave me a reference point, precedent, that I knew that as long as I was willing to keep moving forward, no matter what the setbacks in my life or challenges, I could overcome them. And that is the foundation of everything that became who I am today, is that, yeah, I may have challenges. I may be a little bit slower reader. I may be a little bit less academic than my son or any other people. But I knew that you could not outwork me. Effort was the key, not the grade. And I learned that as an early age, that if you put the effort, then you can actually push through and you can achieve it. It may take me 3 days to read an article, and it may take someone 15 minutes. But at the end of the day, the outcome is finishing the article. And that's something that I really want to press upon the audience, is that we're all unique and different. And how it made me feel, it really inspired me, because when someone told me I couldn't, when someone said, you know what, you're not enough or you don't measure up, I looked at them and said, thank you for that fuel. Thank you for the opportunity to prove you wrong. And I didn't know it when it was happening, but now as I went back and I go back and I reflect on my youth, that was just ingrained in me from day one. My grandmother, who I shared had a second grade education, she believed in herself. And that just transpired into me, and her belief in herself showed that I could believe myself. She moved from Montgomery, Alabama to New York with $26 in her pocket. That is an amazing story just to survive and get there. And I said, if she can do it, I can do it. And I used her as my GPS for success.
So is that something that comes naturally to you? I hear a lot of people saying that, you know, it's the entire definition of the hero's journey, right? You kind of pick yourself up, you don't know who you are, where you want to go, and then you go through some kind of trial and then some kind of triumph, and then you fall again. And it's like that back and forth, back and forth. Is that something that was just ingrained in you when you were younger from your grandma? You said, all right, if she was able to do it, I'm going to kick it in gear, and everyone who's hating on me right now, I'm going to use it as fuel for the fire? Or was that something that you had to teach yourself? Because I'm trying to picture it for everyone out there listening right now. They could hear, all right, Rahz, that's an amazing story, but I don't have that same confidence. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, it definitely, I would love to sit here and say, oh, you know what, I was just born with it. No, I had to cultivate it. And I cultivated it through experiences. Usually, like, I was born with my right leg shorter than the other. No hamstring or quadricep on that right leg with basically a 3.5-inch difference in my right and my left leg. So I limp. And at an early age, I knew I was different just from my body physically with a dysfunction. But then in addition to that, how people perceived me. Everybody looked at me different. Everybody wanted to treat me different. So it didn't matter. I started to become really resilient at an early age. And each year I grew older, that resiliency built it within me, and it hardened to what David Goggins calls the callus. Right? Like, I calloused my mindset so that I was not going to be defeated by someone else's limiting beliefs or who I am. So for the listeners out there, I just want you to think about, what are those challenges and setbacks that you had in your life that are making you and giving you the fuel to move forward, not breaking you.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And as you were talking about just a second ago, how you had a very different outlook on learning compared to a lot of your classmates and other kids at your school. When you look at it now, you are staring at where the destination is. You might say, a perfect example I like to use is when I was an Eagle Scout growing up. And so when I would go hiking with my troop, there was the faster hikers, there was kind of the moderate hikers, and there was the slow hikers. But at the end of the day, it didn't really matter which one you were, because at the end of the day, we all set up camp in the exact same spot. It might take somebody a little bit longer, but we all reached the beautiful destination at the top of the mountain. We all conquered the hill, just at a different speed. And so I was recently just listening to a podcast, Learned or Be Learned. I'll link the episode in the description below. And inside this episode, this man named Shiva, he was describing how when he grew up, he always pictured there was one method of learning. And that was the very picturesque version of how school is ran here in the United States. Of, okay, we're going to sit in the classroom, a teacher's going to get up their whiteboard, and they're going to lecture via PowerPoint or drawing on a board. And us as students, we're going to sit back and take notes, occasionally raise our hands, but sometimes we're afraid if there's a smarter kid in class, they might make fun of us. So we don't want to raise our hands that often. Can't look like we're the dumb ones in class. And so he described inside of this episode that no, like, maybe that works for some students. And I have friends who were those perfect students who it just resonated. As soon as the teacher wrote it on the whiteboard, they understood it and it clicked. But Rahz, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you are not one of those students who learns that way. So tell me a little bit more about how you learned when you were younger and how that educated you to where you're at today.
Yeah, I learned early that I was definitely, and I didn't know this, in my middle school years, but I struggled when a teacher would put something on the board because I was distracted. So I sat in the back because of fear that I was going to get called or I was going to get picked on because I had a reading challenge. So I skipped words because I couldn't pronunciate the words and sound them out properly. So I'd skip them, which lowered my comprehension. So I never wanted to read out loud. So I had to learn how to take really great notes. So I learned to read body language and focus on the instructor or the teacher early on. I would take notes and I'd write down the key things that I needed to remember just enough so that I could recall what the teacher wanted. Now, I will tell you, I wish that I knew now what I knew. I knew now back then what I knew today. But the fact of the matter is that that wasn't going to get me really great grades. I had to incorporate some other strategies, which I've learned later in life, how to use my memory, how to recall better, and things like that. But I will say I had to find out that I was an auditory learner. And I'm
Mm.
able to really listen to what people are saying. And that's how I even use in my career today as a communicator, is because when you can listen, you can learn. And that's the way I learn now. I record everything. Even in college now, I'm willing to go the extra mile so that I can gather the information and then put it into a process that I'll be able to recall it.
Yeah, and that's a good message to share with everybody out there today. The traditional learning styles that were kind of ingrained on our society for the past, 50 to 100 years, that doesn't have to be the same norms today. There's plenty of ways you can get your information and learn from. And even inside of my college lectures, some things that I've been seeing lately are teachers are trying to adapt to that. And I got to give them props because there's a very set format where if you're a college professor, you can kind of just show up and do the same thing every single semester and you don't have to change much because it's a brand new batch of students. But for the ones who are out there trying to excel and actually enjoy their job and want to make a difference inside of these students' lives, I see them putting in work to say, okay, they're not necessarily putting it blatantly, but they're basically stating it out where if you're this type of learner who prefers coming to class, sitting down, taking notes on your laptop, looking at the PowerPoint slides, great. You come to class and we'll be able to figure that out. But then they offer these other options where it's online, where it's auditory, like you were mentioning, Roz. They give other options where if that's not your preferred learning method, if that's not what resonates with you, then you have other ways of doing it. And I feel like you're the type of person, Roz, to kind of share that same message with people where if they're not figuring out a certain way, it's not so much of, okay, you can't figure it out. You just need to learn a different way to figure it out. And I know you work with a ton of clients on that exact specific issue. So tell us a little bit about that and your journey when you've been working with clients when they may not understand it one way, but you have to pivot a little bit where they do understand.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the great work that Carol Dweck did in the book Mindset. And that book really resonates because I kind of help students, specifically young youth, understand if they have a growth or a fixed mindset, explaining that, and then breaking down clarity. Once they have clarity on what type of mindset they have, we can give them tools, strategies, and resources to navigate their challenges. And when a student says, oh, I'm just not that smart at math, well, I can honestly say, hey, you know what? That's your belief. And let's explore that belief. Because if you keep that belief, that's a disempowering belief that will anchor itself and allow you never to grow. What if you just said that you need to work a little bit harder on math and find someone who can actually assist you in understanding math in the way that you learn? Then that opens up that mind and go, oh yeah, maybe that will work. And that is it's just so simple. I think like what you were saying, where I do see a lot of professors and teachers willing to try a new method outside of just blackboards or whiteboards or whatever, but auditory, speechify, different apps, all of these things that allow students to really start to go, we just need a little bit of success. When you get a little bit of success inside the classroom, you'll start to build from that, and that confidence will build. That's what happened with me. I had one teacher that actually believed in me. He was a history teacher. I'm still friends with Mr. Haig, and it was amazing because he believed I got an A in his class because he set the expectations for me, and he didn't allow my limitations to ever be a limit to his belief in who I was as a student. And I think that's where if you're the listeners, if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, educator, it starts with showing this child or the children or the teen or student the belief in them. They can succeed. And it's not about the grade. I'll reiterate again, it's not about the grade. It's always about the effort that they're willing to put forward. If someone gives you that A effort, doesn't matter what the outcome is because you can help them get a better grade.
You know what's interesting that you're making me think of? I'm thinking back a lot of my schooling experience based upon what you're talking about today. I remember there was one teacher in specific. I had actually very amazing teachers. I loved most of my teachers growing up, in high school, middle school, everything. And there's one in specific. I had her for I believe it was my sophomore, junior, and senior year. She did my math classes all 3 years. And like you're kind of mentioning, I don't know if I'm mislabeling myself here, but I was not a very good math student. Math just doesn't resonate with me a ton. And so she was like a math whiz. She had gone on, she was a great teacher, but also she sold math questions and she like put out these crazy problems and algorithms that people would buy from her. Like she was a hustler in and of itself. And when I took her class, she recognized from the very beginning I wasn't super into math. She loved math. She lived and breathed it. And so when she found students like that, they would become best friends. She'd be able to resonate with them. But at the same time, even though I wasn't necessarily a great math student, and she could tell I wasn't always getting the same concepts that other students would be, she still connected with me on a personal level to things I would understand. She was very big into tennis. I loved playing tennis. And so she would connect with me on that concept. And so I think a big message we got to share today, Roz, making sure it sticks with the audience, is there's going to be people inside of our lives where you may not have a direct correlation. It may not fit perfectly where a math teacher to a perfect math student in my case, but she was still able to be there for me and teach me powerful life lessons and be a good mentor to me, even though I wasn't directly relating with her subject. Talk about that a little bit, Roz.
I love that. That's a great segue. I mean, it's just about mentorship, right? It's about finding someone who's willing to pour into you something that they're passionate and know well enough that they can break it down and make it clear for you so that you have understanding. And it's something that I do with what a lot of times I'm helping and coaching kids who have a disability, learning disability, function, whatever it might be. And they don't believe in themselves. Their self-concept, their idea of who they are is so limited because the society's telling them that they're not enough. And what I like to do is build in and say, hey, you are enough. And if we can build your internal self-confidence so that you say, hey, you know what? I like myself. I like my ideal self. And I know my future self. We can become confident in that. And that's what a mentor does, right? A mentor is willing to pour something into you that you don't know for yourself so that you can have a new belief and see opportunities. And I think that's the message of just, I had to get over myself. At one point, my ego was big because I was so afraid. Once you release the ego, then you can truly be human and see people for who they are and their authentic and greatness.
If you're trying to be, maybe mentor is not the right word, but I might just use it for this case. If you're trying to be a mentor, you're trying to be kind of a influential figure into somebody's life, what happens is you're trying to help them, you're giving them advice, it will help them, but they're behind. They're not living up to their full potential. You give them the perfect layout, the laid out plan, you give them the game plans, and they're not going to take it into advice and they don't listen to it. How does that affect the mentor state? And is there anything you could do in that situation? How do you continue to encourage them?
So it comes back to a little bit of Carl Rogers' personal centered approach. It's not about the mentor. It's always about the mentee, the person that you're pouring into. So you don't need to have validation that what you're giving or providing them is working. You have to meet the mentee at where they are. And anytime I get the opportunity to mentor youth or someone at risk, I'm not coming and saying, you know what? I know everything. I've done this. I've been here. This is what you should listen to. I just say, hey, what's up? What's your goals? What would you like to accomplish? What is the biggest challenge you're having right now? And if I were able to give you some insight on that, would you be open to listening? Would you be open to actually taking some new actions so that you might be able to get where you want to go? It starts with the ability to give them questions and allow them to have that introspective time to reflect on where they are, where they would like to go, and then I can give them a simple, here's the plan. That's the gap. You're here. You want to get here. Let's take the first step. And if we can do that, what I was sharing with you earlier is that success stacking. People can't believe they can climb a mountain. Like, you're an Eagle Scout. I was a scout. I didn't believe that I could actually get to that level until I got my first badge, till I got that first award. And then I got the second one, the third one, the fourth one. And that is how we build those success habits into our lives. And a lot of people who are struggling, they don't have anything to reflect on that's been successful. So we podcasters, people out here just trying to influence the world, have to be willing to meet them where they are. That's the first step.
Let's go back to the traditional form of education we've talked about a lot. When you were in high school, did you have teachers that believed in you, or did most of them count you off?
Man, I mean, so yeah, I'm keeping it real with you. Most of them counted me off because I was in a very affluent neighborhood. I was the only Black student, or one of three in the school. And I came from the part of the area that wasn't affluent. So they basically knew that, hey, this he's getting bussed in, his grades are not great. He does it, he's showing up sometimes and not all the time. I was an athlete. I wrestled. So I was there. I did great on the mat, but I wasn't great in the classroom. And so, but there were a couple who I still am friends with who believed in me. And all I needed was a little bit of that insight that, hey, they were willing to pour into me. And that was enough to get me through. When I look back, I do feel like the system failed me. I think the educational system failed me because a lot of times when I was struggling, they just pushed us through. And we know that now in the United States, we have this no child left back, which I don't believe in. I believe that if you're struggling at an early age, we need to get that fixed before we push you on to those 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, because then you're so far behind that you can't catch up. And it makes you feel inferior, and that inferiority sets into something even greater in the self when you just don't believe in yourself.
So I guess this goes back to what we already mentioned. Maybe you got to talk on it a little bit more. I feel like most of the students who were in that boat, though, if they didn't have somebody who believed in them, if they were literally the minority inside of the schools, like, what made you want to keep going? I know you said that you had to cultivate a lot of motivation inside of your life, but dig deeper. What gave you the courage to keep going? Nobody believed in you. You didn't have a teacher who was supporting you. No offense, but you didn't have a lot of family figures who were behind you. You were kind of on your own in a lot of this journey. So what kept you going?
Beautiful. The one thing that kept me going was the fact that I made a promise to my grandmother. My grandmother, although she didn't have the education I shared with you, she gave me the opportunity to live in an area, to get educated, to have experiences. And I promised her one thing: she'd never see me have handcuffs on. She'd never see me get in trouble with the law. And I was going to make her proud by any means necessary. And I believe I did that. I was able to go on and do some amazing things in my career, starting gyms, becoming a personal trainer, transforming the lives of thousands and thousands of people. And she got to witness that evolution of who I was, from the 1.6 GPA to the multiple gym owner, entrepreneur, author, and thought leader.
That's awesome. And for everyone who's listening out there that may be in that same struggle where you feel like you don't have anyone in your corner, just know at the end of the day, maybe Rahz didn't see anyone specifically inside of his corner, but he made that original promise to his grandma. And so you had your grandma, you had at least one person who's reaching out to you. Guys, if you feel like you don't even have the one person, message me, message Rahz. We'll be in your corner. And at the end of the day, you'll always have God in your corner as well. He's always there watching over and protecting you. You may not always feel it. You may not, definitely won't always see it, but I promise you he's there. So Rahz, I want to ask you a little bit more into this education system. Where do you think it's at in the United States? You mentioned you're not a huge fan of this No Child Left Behind, or in other words, I call it Common Core since I grew up in California. That's the big word for it out there. Where do you think education needs to change, both at a younger grade point as well as in our college institutions? Where do you think the U.S. is at right now, and where do we need to turn in order for it to be as effective as it was 100 years ago?
Wow, Brad. Do you not want us to get canceled today? No, great question. I think that education in this country starts at home. I believe that if you're a parent listening, you're going to have to be the number one advocate for your child. You can't expect the government, the policies, the teachers to do anything more than you are not willing to do for your child. So you got to step up. And I believe in self-education. And if you want your child to be better in school, you got to look at yourself and say, am I leading from the front? And what is it that I need to become so that my child can have the advantages that I want them to have? Yeah, I mean, we can wait and say, school systems are broken, teachers are underpaid. That's all real. I understand that. And I'm a big advocate of teachers. I believe that teachers are some of the greatest people in the world because they are the ones that are in the front line working with our children every single day. But I am a father now, and I have the obligation to make sure that if I want my children to thrive and not just survive, I got to be willing to go out and do my due diligence so that I can actually help them get to where they want to go.
I actually agree with you 100%. I'm a big family guy, and I believe a lot of the life lessons you learn is centered around the family unit. And so these principles and life lessons where kids grow up looking at their parents, you are on a pedestal. Your kids are always watching you. They are going to see what you do, the way you talk to your spouse, the way you treat other people, the way you act around your home, the way you take care of your own body. They are going to emulate these exact same things. So, Roz, in your situation, like we've mentioned a few times, you had an amazing grandma who was there for you, who wanted the best for you. You didn't have really any parents who were directly guiding you, though. What do you say to the families out there who their parents aren't there? Their parents aren't there for them. They're out of the picture.
I say to you, decide that you're not going to be a statistic. And what do I mean by that? I was blessed with a book called The Magic of Thinking Big by Brian Schwartz. That is the first book that I read from cover to cover. And I got that book from a gentleman who I was sitting at a diner, and he introduced me to a network marketing company, and he handed that book to me. And that was the book that was the catalyst for my growth mindset, my self-development beginning and journey. So if you're someone who out there who doesn't have the typical traditional upbringing, two parents in a home, loving, caring, all of that things that we need, I say to you, don't be a victim. Step up and decide to be a victor and take your life and go after it. There's no reason why we can't thrive today. There's books, there's podcasts, there's coaches, there's so much. And if you say, oh, I don't have any resources, then you have to become more resourceful, because you can't sit here and be, oh, woe me, woe me. And I understand that some of us are going to have deeper challenges, adverse childhood experiences, you name it. But what happens is that when we buy into those press clippings, we become that. So if you're listening, definitely listen to podcasts like this. Get around other people who are empowering, people who are uplifting and open-minded. That is how you begin the process of change.
That's perfect. Beautiful message you just shared. And as we come to the closeout of today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, I want everyone to make sure that they could reach out to you personally if they have any questions, or just follow your content, because you always have a lot of good stuff posting out. Likewise, everybody, if you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to give it a thumbs up, leave it a 5-star review, and share it with anybody who you think would benefit from today's words. But yeah, Roz, tell us where everyone can find you and leave us your final piece of advice.
Beautiful. So the best place to find me, of course, is Rahz Slaughter on social media. Slaughter, the S, like laughter with an S. And more importantly, you can find my website at theunstoppablетeenager.com. My final message is one of my favorite quotes by Helen Keller. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. You have the opportunity to make your life a daring adventure by deciding to take the first step. That first step may be something different for Brandon, and may be different for me, but what that first step is deciding that you're going to be intentional about your life and never allow anyone else to be the author of your story. You can. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Roz. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you next time.